Welcome back, friends. You may have noticed that things have been a little less than consistent lately, and while I won't apologize for it, I'll try to make it up to you nonetheless. The past few weeks have been a whirlwind, with the majority of time being taken up both preparing for and attending WPPI, a huge photo conference out in Las Vegas. I had planned to record a bunch of interviews while I was out there and bring back snippets from a lot of new guests, but that just never really happened. So instead, I thought I'd create another Focal Points episode with Jonny Edward and have a deep dive into all things WPPI. Jonny and I shared a room at the Mirage, as we have at several other conferences, and we do it for a variety of reasons: to save money, to hang out, and more importantly, to make sure that we both escape Vegas alive. And I suppose if you're hearing this, we were successful on all counts. This conversation is a long one, clocking in at a little over 2 hours, so I've decided to split it into two parts. In this first part, we talk about our completely different experiences at this year's WPPI, some of the good, the bad, and of course, our unsolicited opinions on what we could do better when it comes to the shooting bays. Part two is a bit more lighthearted, and while only time will tell if it's the right thing to do to be this honest, you'll hear about Jonny's post-WPPI workshop, which led to our last night in Vegas, which was the closest I'll ever get to living like Hunter S. Thompson. So let's dive right in to a full recap of WPPI 2024 on this episode of Focal Points with my friend, Jonny Edward. Actually am digging the new setup. You put new shelves in and some old cameras, and
yeah. I decided just to, the environmental thing, I actually got that from you, going like, all right, I love this spatial thing, but giving a little bit more context and bringing in some visual things. So if someone goes around the frame, there's actually something to look at, which was my fucking poison, because I'm like, all right, well, those aren't lit now, so fucking projector here, projector there, rim light fucking here. And then as soon as I got into it, I was just like, oh my fucking God, like, what am I doing with my life?
How's it been the week post WPPI? Have you survived like I have, or are you still all a mess?
I'm good, but I'm still a mess. You know, I think I'm a good mess. I think there's always a refractory period for me after these conferences. I'll say I felt the best after this that I've ever felt after a conference. But it was just the sort of emotional, social taxing of it all, the cumulative effect. And it was really good. By and large, I met great people. You and me hanging out the entire time was wonderful. There were all these really positive aspects, but it's just, I am an introvert extrovert, and that extrovert part of me was very well fed, and the introvert part of me was completely fucking starved. Yeah. So I got back famished, and I'm like, all right, I need to retreat into myself. And so I did the Netflix and chill. Yeah. You know, and fucking just ordered in food and ate like 7 pizzas in one day and had heartburn for 24 hours straight. But then there were all of these looming things that I still needed to do for stuff that was upcoming. So I gave myself about 24 hours of nothing, and then automatically was like, all right, I have to jump back into the fucking fire now because I'm so behind the curve. So I've just been chasing my tail a little bit and trying to do the self-care, but also trying to be pragmatic so that the self-care doesn't turn into not necessarily self-destruction, but self-harm in a way where I'm postponing things that really cannot be postponed reasonably.
You want to decompress. You want to give yourself time to just kind of get back into that mental space, but there's always that looming, I just missed a week and I need to play catch up. How am I going to do that? And it's finding that balance. I know for me, it was kind of the same. My introvert got fed because I basically shut myself off from society all week. And then my extrovert side at WPPI, I forced to happen because it took me so long to get back home after your workshop. That Friday night, hung out. We'll talk about that Friday night in a little bit. The Saturday I spent at the airport and then took the red eye home. While I'm taking the red eye home, time changed, right? The time change happened. So by the time I landed, I was like that Robin Williams meme. I'm like, what year is it? I had no clue when I landed in Boston. where I was, what year it was. Did anything really just happen, or did I just dream this past week? So this whole week after WPPI has been really trying to just get my body clock going. And unlike you, I don't have a million things on my plate, but I was still trying to feel like I was playing catch up and get organized again. And I've got all my legal pads and all my to-do lists and all my things. And I still don't feel like I've gotten my feet back underneath me. So, what I find really interesting is we had so much time, right? We'd meet up in the hotel room, be like, all right, what's the game plan? And I'd see you run off and I'd run off in a different direction, but we had vastly different experiences during the entire week. So I was fully just attending, hanging out, doing my thing. And you were in booths and teaching and modeling. I know every time that I walked by your booth, it was swamped. How did you manage the modeling and the teaching and the crowd control and all of that at once? I was getting so much sensory overload, I couldn't handle it. How did you do it?
The best I could. That's probably the answer. So for me, the modeling thing is fun for me. I'm not going to lie. Obviously, I like being in front of the camera. I wanted to teach. So I wanted to teach and speak at WPPI. They didn't give me that opportunity directly. I think it's something weird that's happened at the past couple of conferences where they know I have a certain look and a certain energy and charisma, and however we want to sort of categorize that. And so they decide to sort of, for lack of better phrasing, pigeonhole me into the modeling thing, which is all well and good, but it's not where my heart's really at. And I feel like, in a way, who I am is misallocated when I'm just simply standing in front of the camera. And that's just my take. And obviously, I'm very biased in that. So my ask for them was, I'm like, listen, I'll do this in one of the bays. However, I don't want someone sort of like almost teaching or guiding or like bodyguarding me while I'm doing it. I still want to be able to interact with these photographers and teach them. And I probably bit off more than I could chew with that. But it gave me a chance to actually properly connect, because I feel like at these, conferences, and of course, we'll talk about this more in a bit, so often if there's a photographer, they walk up and they see the model and they're like, good, cool,
right,
thank you, I'm Bill, and they walk away.
Right.
And I wanted more than that. So for me, I think I always subdivide things in my mind. I've done this since I was a kid. So like, I can't look at the totality of something because the anxiety sets in and I get so fucking mired in it that then I'm like, this seems like a good solution. And that's not. For those of you who are just listening and you can't see, there was a gun to my head, not a real gun, but a finger gun, bang, bang. But I realized there's so much ahead of me that I just sort of get paralyzed. So I literally looked at the single person in front of me, when I was there at the booth, and everything on the periphery disappeared. Yep. And so that's why I think I came across as so genuine, because I was. So if you were there, I'd be like, hey, Matt, what's going on? What do you have going on? Here's our lighting setup today. We can turn this on. We can turn this off. What are you feeling mood-wise? Like, this is what I can do. Here's some ideas for you, but I'm here for you. So what do you want? And I think in doing that, I allowed myself, like, each thing drained me, but it also recharged me because it felt more intimate. Sure. So if I wouldn't have done that and sort of like gone above and tried to connect in a more direct way with people, I think I would have just gotten eviscerated by the whole thing. But each little thing was a microcosm unto itself. And of course, by the time, 1 o'clock hit, I was fucking famished, and they're like, you have to take a break. And I'm like, well, there's 20 people and I feel fucking bad because they've been here for 30 minutes and they had to whip me and tell me to go eat, beef and broccoli in the back or whatever the fuck was staged. But I think it was really for me trying to make the most of it. Like, I've been at a lot of these conferences and, it's sort of like a high school lock-in at the bowling alley when someone sneaks in mushrooms and vodka. And so, it's just been like, oh, we're fucking here and we're adults, but we're also kids and we're away from responsibilities. And I told myself, I'm like, well, that's fine. And that's well and good. But I actually wanted to make the most of it and focus on just connection in a way that I hadn't before. And so I probably haven't answered the question at all. I'm doing the politician thing. That's a great question.
No, I think you did. So one of the things, I have a love-hate relationship with the shooting bays, right? Mm-hmm. So having experienced them for so many years at the Portrait Masters, it's always been a really cool thing to be able to have, almost an infinite array of models and backgrounds and lighting setups. And you can go and really create stuff for your portfolio or just learn different lighting setups or learn how to interact with the model, like I really loved that. The hate side of it is that because I rely so much on connection, I only get 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Now, the way that I shoot, I like to try to be intentional. And I say, all right, I'm going to go into this booth with this lens. I'm going to take 3 frames. I'm going to switch to this lens, take 3 more frames, and then be done. That could take me 2 minutes. It could take me 10 minutes. I have no idea what I'm walking into, but usually 2 minutes is plenty of time for me. This year, I felt like every time I wandered into a shooting bay, it was really rushed. I felt very out of sorts, and it had nothing to do with the models. All of the models that I worked with were great, but I just felt this overwhelming overload, this sensory overload. There was too many people, too many cross conversations. I didn't feel like I could connect, and I just wound up avoiding the shooting bays altogether and then just observing what was going on. So there were a couple of bays that I saw that were really, really good. Yours obviously was nonstop action. And every time I looked over, I'm like, of course he's in an Aunt Jemima bonnet and wings. And then the next day, it's like, of course he's a Cubanismo, right? So your styling was great. I thought Mitzi Starkweather's booth was great.
Phenomenal.
Which is kind of like the polar opposite of what you had with all the styling and the attention. Hers was very stripped down for the raw portrait stuff. And people were having a blast with it. And I love that. A lot of the other bays, what I saw was the paparazzi, the piranhas, right? So even while one person is engaged with the model and working with them, you've got crowds of people around just shooting over the shoulder. One, it's annoying. Two, it's annoying to watch, right? Because they're so consumed with that, people aren't getting out of your way, just being societally polite. The third thing, and I had to wonder this as a photographer, I'm like, what pictures are you getting with that? And I saw it all week. It wasn't just the shooting bay alley. It was everywhere.
Oh, it was. It was TPM. It was the parties we attended and those things.
Everything. I think people feel like they're going to miss a moment and I've got to capture everything rather than just being present and observing and taking pictures with your eyes rather than just your camera. And I feel like there's this need to shoot, and less of a need to just sit back and think, do I even need this image?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this something that I could use or sell or market? A lot of the times the styling is so over the top, and I mean that in a good way. It's so fantastic. It's so beautiful. There's not a lot of people that sell that kind of work,
of course,
right? And I wonder, with all of these photographers, they're taking all these pictures, what is it that they're learning? And I ask that honestly. I don't know what it is that they're going home with, because I think I shot a total of 70 usable frames the entire week. Right before this call, I was showing you some of them. That was the best of the best. And I really didn't shoot a whole lot because there wasn't anything that I could really pull into my own business. Yeah. So my experience with the shooting bays was just that. Too many people, too little intentionality, and too much just trying to capture. Because I'm there, let me just shoot everything. Yeah. I don't know. I find that weird, especially amongst so many photographers, that there's so little intention. Did you feel people coming into your booth that they had an intention?
I think my experience was probably different, simply because like people who were there could see that I was interacting and asking for that level of intention from people. So I think there's the aspect of like what someone brings to the table, and then there's sort of like us on the other side of that in production, as models, as mentors, as whatever, in the intention that we're setting for people. Right. So part of it is their mindset, and part of it is the mindset or framework that we're creating for them. So I think, and there was that fucking line that was going around the side, and I looked and I went, oh shit. But every single person who was coming up saw me walk up and once again say like, hey, what's going on, Matt? This is what's happening. Like, we have a key light, we have a backlight. If my hat's on, I suggest keeping it on for separation. If it's off, I'm a shiny motherfucker. Let's turn it off, because that's not the greatest look for me, and you're not going to love those photos. So there was that element, and I'm like, do you want the jacket on? Do you want the jacket off? Do you want me sad, melancholy? the most requested fucking thing that I got from everyone, of course, was, can you be the Joker? And I was like, yeah, I can be a complete fucking maniac that's been castigated by society and left by the wayside. I think I can manufacture that persona. But so I think part of it was me, but I did see that. And like you and me spent that day when I first got in at TPM shooting some of the bays. And obviously you saw what I did. Like I went in and I felt the same way that you did. I got a couple of shots that I really loved. And then I tried to modify the bay. So I turned off a fill light in one of them and that felt really good, but it's the same thing. I think there's this essence almost of like I versus us.
Yeah.
For a lot of people. And I know that sounds like something that would be in like a yoga teacher training. People are there and they're so encapsulated in themselves that they're missing out on the greater experience. It's like, what am I going to get? What am I going to create? I need this, I need that, instead of being like, oh, fuck, I'm in line with all of these other people. Here's a maternity photographer. Here's a family portrait photographer. Here's a fashion photographer. Oh, fuck, here's a famous photographer that I adore who's in line waiting. Or here's someone who's asked me for advice. And so we just lose sight of everything that's around us and become so myopic that we're so obsessed. And then there's this like economic value thing where it's like, well, I paid X hundreds of dollars to be here and I'm paying X hundreds of dollars to this fucking hotel that's just raking me over the coals and charging me $20 for water. And there's this and there's that. I need to recoup my investment by shooting 2,000 frames a day, even though none of those frames have any value whatsoever. But I think it's just people being too wrapped up in and lost in themselves and their experience, and in that closing themselves off to the greater experience and the greater connections. And for me, that's what it's really fucking all about. But it's just a different mindset given where I'm at in my journey. And I know you feel similarly, but to come back around, yes, I absolutely saw that. I absolutely experienced that. And I think Mitzi was a great thing, her having people prompt, like, essentially forcing the photographers who were at her bay to interact, change the dynamic. Totally. Because then it wasn't just the paparazzi. It was like, oh, hey, Matt, be happy, be sad, be scared, be surprised. And it was so campy, but that was beautiful because it allowed two people to actually exist amidst that chaos in a more significant way, versus like, oh, here's a really beautiful statuesque blonde model who's style couture, and all of us are just going to photograph her like on the red carpet. And forget the fact that we're actually portrait photographers and the fact that this is actually a fucking person in front of us. And that's unfortunate for everyone. And I also think, overtly, WPPI is trying to shift, of course. Like everyone's trying to pivot in this industry right now. And so they brought in those shooting bays to a degree that has never been present at WPPI before. And that's, of course, part of the merger with TPM and taking and appropriating things here and there. But I don't necessarily think they were even ready production-wise for how fucking excited people would be to be able to do something interactive. And so there probably wasn't even enough foresight into how to properly prepare the models and the staff that were running these booths to say, this is what it's going to be like. This is how we deal with things. This is how we mediate and set precedent and tone and intention. And that's not a fault of anyone. It's just the nature of evolution and how these things sort of move forward.
I don't think they were prepared, the powers that be, right? Because they introduced the shooting bays a couple of years ago. Yeah. And when they first got introduced, I want to say it was 2 years ago that they first introduced shooting bays. And people didn't know what they were or what to do with them. Last year, they were a little bit more integrated and people started to get the feel for it. This year, it seemed like there was a lot of attention on it. The only logistical problem I saw with it, outside of my own feelings about lines and waiting and all that, is the area in which it was compressed, right? Agreed. So for those of you that weren't at WPPI, there was one area of the trade hall where Peter Hurley was trying to set a record for the most amount of headshots in a day. And I don't know if he reached it or not, the Guinness Book of World Record, but he had like an entire end of the trade show hall for just all these headshot stations, which was kind of cool. Yeah. I think from the standpoint of where they had the shooting bays this year in essentially one aisle, in one row, if they were spread out a little bit further to give a bit more space, I think it would feel less intense. Agreed. And allow the people to connect a little bit more with the models, with the booth mentors, with whoever might be there. It felt very cramped, and I just found myself spinning in circles, going, "Are you in line? Am I in somebody else's shot?"
I heard that a lot.
And there's people there shooting with 300 millimeter lenses, and they're, basically standing in the booth across the hall.
Yep.
So I think from a logistical standpoint, it proved that people love this type of amenity at a trade show. The thing that I think they still need to work out is the logistics of where, how properly spaced out, how staffed, like all that sort of stuff. Well, and that will work itself out in time for sure.
Of course. And I think there's also a twofold benefit. If that were to be more segmented, people would be able to essentially have a little bit of a blinder on because it's all not happening at the same place. But that also would create better flow throughout the show floor for vendors as well. Because I know personally, like when I was just walking, like as soon as I would get off, I'm like, I wanted to connect with Sigma. I wanted to connect with Sony. I just didn't have the bandwidth for that. Like once they let me off for my break, I'm like, by the time I walk 3 city blocks to where food staging is at, stuff my face like it's the mess hall, put my plate up and get back, I'm still going to be 5 minutes late. Right. So I didn't have the time for that. But what I did see was it was so heavily weighted to that right side of the room that vendors who were on the other side were sort of left by the wayside. So I think they could probably strategically place those shooting bays not only to create separation and distinction, but also some semblance of almost like feng shui or flow throughout the trade show floor that would benefit attendees, vendors, models, and just everyone. It would be a win-win all around. So we'll see what happens, especially that they're, switching over to the Rio, which is a whole other thing entirely.
I've never been to the Rio. I think it'll be interesting, but I swear to God, if they don't put some fucking water on the trade show floor, it really astounded me. And I don't know if that was a call of Emerald with the trade show. I assume not. I assume it was probably something to do with the hotel, casino, and conference center. The fact that there was, unless I missed it, there were no water stations anywhere inside the trade show. And I think just from a human rights standpoint.
No, I agree.
You can't have that because the closest water was either drinking from the bathroom taps, which I ain't going to do, or walking, a quarter of a mile back to Starbucks to get a $7 bottle of water and then walk all the way back to the trade show. That's got to be fixed.
Well, I found it kind of weird too. Like I spent time growing up in Arizona, and literally like it's illegal in Arizona to deny someone water because you're dealing with that same desert environment. So you have people coming from all around the world, different sea levels, different environments who aren't prepared for that. You have people who maybe drink 2 or 3 times a year who went out to the Capri bar, had an open bar, and literally became fucking The Walking Dead the day after, looking like California raisins because they were dehydrated to the point where I could feel their kidneys shutting down, like tangibly. So I agree. That was a big oversight, not on even any type of service, but just to say like, hey, like, if someone's insanely dehydrated, number one, it's a massive health risk for them. But like, you're not going to have a good time if you're short 4 liters of water. Like your brain doesn't retain, dopamine's not being made, your reward system is short fucking circuited. So just like give people water, even snacks, perhaps, fucking granola bars, something. Have Nature's Valley come in and we could just have crumbs all over the fucking show floor, but that's a very foundational thing.
You want to keep people at your booth, Canon, Fuji, Nikon, have just bins of water, right?
Literally.
Just little grab and go.
Timeshare status. You have to hear me talk about the Sony A1 if you want 24 ounces of water, and people would have been like, oh, that's fucking amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I need a global shutter. Like, that's fucking cool, man.
I mean, let's step back just a second and give a huge high five to Fuji, because we walked into that big like opening night Capri party, and you and I both walked into WPPI planning to have an entirely sober week. And I know that I've been sober pretty much for a couple of months now, and I was feeling great. And I'm going into WPPI and I'm feeling the best I felt in a long time. We go to the party and we're dressed up and we're just kind of chilling out, and I'm going to go get my, $11 water at the club. And then the bartender's like, well, it's open bar. And I said, excuse me?
And it was literally this. It was half fucking off. Like,
what did you just say to me? And he was just like, oh, it's open bar. I'm like, oh, this is not good. So that being said, while we did maintain moderate control that night, it's like they locked the doors and just shit went off the rails. It was a phenomenal party. Like, it was a great time. But like you said, it was like kids with no supervision. And we were only there from 9:30 to maybe midnight, thereabouts, whenever they closed the club.
Yep.
And it was the most crowded I had ever seen it. People were dancing on poles, bodies everywhere, just people stumbling from bar to bar. And then everybody spilled out at the same time with that same 1,000-yard stare, like, what?
Manic, dead shark. Where am I? What am I doing?
And oh my God, we've got to get up in 3 hours to start the day. It was a great party. I had a really, really good time. But that kind of set the stage for the whole week of saying, all right, we're definitely going to need more Gatorade. I'm going to Walgreens. What do you need?
On that note too, this is completely sort of, I mean, it's aligned, but also it's not. What's curious to me about the corporate entities, and of course, like, we can talk about all these brands, ultimately they're all just, these large corporations, and they have their own agendas. But you take someone like Fuji, like, they're fucking rad. I know you're a Fuji shooter. I've been trying to get my hands on the GFX system for literally years now. I've been talking with them, and I've been on the waiting list. I was supposed to have it at TPM last year. I didn't. So I'm like, the amount of money that was allocated to that party, and once again, there's no regrets from me. Like, it was fucking rad. We had a great time. But I think, all right, I know how many photographers and artists are vying to be able to either work with a new piece of Fuji gear or kit that they don't have, or explore the Fuji ecosystem, and they can't do it. So I don't even want to fucking fathom how much money was spent on Fuji on that party for something that ostensibly people aren't going to remember. Like, they're not going to associate it with Fuji. They're going to associate it with the person they danced with, or someone who stole their pants or hat or self-respect or whatever the fuck it may have been. So I'm like, who is the decision maker who decides, like, hey, we're going to allocate 4, 5, 6 digits toward booze? But like, when we have someone who literally might want to invest their career into our ecosystem, we're not going to allow them to explore that opportunity. Yeah. It's a very curious thing to me overall, and that's a philosophical sort of thing we don't need to delve into necessarily, but it's odd.
No, but it's true, right? So marketing budgets are a thing. And it always makes me laugh because, I see all that. And again, I love Fuji, and watching Victor, look out over this crowd. He's like, my people, my people in party, like,
Caesar goes, keep drinking. Like, yes,
it was great. But I talked to my friend Stacy, who's one of the marketing heads at Fuji, and basically saying, like, this has been a great show, but when I look at the budgets, like you said, where is the best allocation of funds? And this goes for any company, small or large, is what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Is it brand loyalty? Is it exposure for your products, right? They had the big X106 launch. Yeah. And it's always interesting to see what their expected outcome is for the marketing dollars. Yeah. And, I look at all the small booths as well, and I say, wow, they probably paid 10, 15 grand just to have a booth. Oh, and the smallest footprint.
Yeah, literally the closet booth. No, knocks on closet booths. That's still presence.
And I'm always curious. I try to go by those small booths and talk to the people there and get a feel for, why are you doing this? Yeah. Why are you here at this trade show? Because it brings me to my question to you. Are trade shows dead? Are trade shows even worth it anymore when we have access to everybody we need to get access to? We have all these small workshops and retreats popping up all over the place. You can learn anything on the internet. You can go to any camera store and play with anything. What's the appeal? And I'm asking this because I'm trying to solidify my own thoughts on it, and I don't know. But I feel like the big trade show that we all know is dying a slow death, and they're doing everything that they can to make it more interesting. I feel like in 5 years, no one's going to be going to trade shows.
So as a whole, like, overtly, I would agree with you. I think that the The consumer demand has changed. I think the marketplace has changed. Obviously, the dynamic of what's available to us, where, when, and how has changed.
Right.
And I think that's probably why WPPI pivoted so hard into that shooting day aspect of it, because they realized that this almost window shopping, educator speaking at the artist thing is becoming less and less relevant with each passing day, passing season, passing year. So I don't know that if as a whole it's dead. I think as we know it, it is dead. And I think this was sort of a resuscitation of sorts, like trying to pivot. And I think these companies are realizing that too. And in large companies, for instance, Matt Group, who handles, Nanlite and Ellen Chrome here in the US, Gravity Backdrops, a bunch of others, they had zero presence. Right. They decided that it wasn't relevant for them to allocate marketing dollars because the past couple of trade shows like this have not proven a measurable return on that investment.
Right.
And so I think we're seeing that happening more and more. So it's almost like, the academian type of thing. It's an evolve or die, like the publisher perish. I think that's what we're seeing now in this side of things. It's evolve or die. And I think overall, in a way, to me, it's a little bit heartening, because what I see as being a catalyst for this is people are craving more intimate and authentic experiences. Yeah. They want something that's more centered on community. They want something that's more centered on them. They want dialogue, not monologues. They want to have conversations and just not be talked at or to or sold to, especially. And so I don't know. I'm not really sure where it's going to go, but I do think that so much has changed, and especially with the pandemic and how we emerged from that for better and for worse, and what fell by the wayside and what was magnified, and especially the mindset surrounding this industry. There's also, of course, just a massive faction of people who have no fucking interest in learning, going to these things. They're not going to buy new gear. They just want to go because it's something that they might be able to write off and party and have fun and connect. And that's something else entirely. So I think that contingent will continue forward, because so many people are working, multiple jobs or 60 hours a week, and have their partners and have their families and have their kids and have all of these responsibilities. And they get to go, hey, I'm going to better myself, when in reality, bettering yourself is just getting smashed. And I support that wholeheartedly. I think that's great. I think we all need to step away from the humdrum and routine and mundane elements of life and just fucking let loose and sort of tune into who we are at a baser level and primitive nature and things like that. So I think in that way, this will probably be kept afloat by that sort of sub-faction or subsect, or however you want to phrase it, of people who are there just to fucking have fun. Economics change, society changes, the political landscape changes. And so if things tighten up, there's other ways to have fun that are more economically feasible, where you're not in fucking Las Vegas, once again, paying $10 for a glass of water or $45 for a Woodford at the center bar from a bartender who has no fucking interest in even looking you in the eye.
We started on those guys.
So to answer your question, I do. I think the model as it has existed is dying. And the question is whether these entities and the powers that be will sort of operate from an agile standpoint to see what's changing and to actually be of service and accommodate that, their people, their community, or if they'll continue to lumber on, as many corporate entities do, and just sort of fade into obscurity under the guise of whatever their mission statement or fucking ethos or whatever that might be. So it's going to be sort of intriguing to watch, possibly in a slightly macabre way, but time will tell.
One of the things that I saw a lot more of this year, and I don't have the stats, it just felt like there were more photo walks, less seminars. That the seminars that were free were so overlapped that you had to pick and choose, because there were so many other photo walks that you basically had one seminar in the morning, one seminar in the afternoon. I'm making, big, large general statements, but the fact is I didn't go to any of the photo walks. I didn't want to spend the money, quite frankly, on $150, $250, whatever it was, for an hour and a half with somebody. But I understand the appeal of small class situations. Now, where I think there's room for brands is, rather than having these photo walks, or infuse the photo walks, like I think Fuji did some photo walks straight from their booth. What you did with your workshop at the end of the week was, bringing in lights from Nanlite and, styling from So Trendy, and having all of these different brands work at one workshop in cohesion was a great way to expose really interested parties to a brand, to interact with it, to really play with it, not so much on the show floor where you're being pushed a coupon or a QR code and just go learn more about it here.
Shuffled along. Yeah.
Just shuffled along. I think if there's that level of interaction, there's room for more of that. However, the proliferation of the photo walks, I feel, is cannibalizing the crowd that is there to do other things and go to some of these seminars. And I feel like it's just a little bit out of balance. If I'm paying to go to a trade show, and then for everything that I want to do at the trade show, I've got to pay more.
The add-on.
It starts to feel like someone's hand is always in my pocket, right? Versus when I was going to Portrait Masters, you pay the premium for the ticket. And then you have access to everything, and everybody kind of floats along to the same things. You all experience it together, and that creates this incredible culture. With WPPI, I understand it's 10 times, 20 times the size of the old Portrait Masters. I understand that, it's a function of scale, what you can do. But it felt like there's the people that go on photo walks. There's the people that just go to the trade show. There's the people that are there just to party. And it feels disjointed from a photography community standpoint.
Yeah, agreed.
Now, you step back a little bit and you look at the grand perspective, and it's great to have all that creativity in one place. However, I felt this year very disjointed in my interactions with people, and I found that I was just gravitating towards my circle of friends. And even though I was trying to branch out and meet new people and network with different companies and vendors and had some great conversations, it felt a bit more scattered. So I don't know if that is the introduction of the Portrait Masters, the Lighting Masters, the Wedding Masters, the Icon Awards, right? There was a lot that shifted this year. So inherently there was going to be a little bit of chaos, but I don't know, for my standpoint, and I've only gone for a couple of prior years, but having gone to trade shows in Vegas for the better part of a decade, this one felt a little bit scattered, not in a bad way, but just kind of like, it's like that awkward teenage years, right? I know WPPI has been around forever, but it just felt like there's a shift happening and they don't quite know where it's going to shift to. So it's on people like us to give feedback and say, hey, here's what worked and what didn't work. Not in a bad way. It's just, constructive criticism.
Yeah, so very much so.
I'm interested to hear over the next few weeks kind of the fallout from other people. Yeah. That being said, there's a handful of things that I saw there that I don't know if it was the mirage, if it was the caliber of photographers that are coming through. I don't like to sit in judgment, but I saw.
But we will.
but I'm going to climb right up on my throne. The fucking creepy guys with cameras really upset me.
Yeah, agree.
It's very, and you've heard me talk about this before. There's a certain type of photographer that is there to capture content. Maybe they're pro, maybe they're not, but there's a vibe that comes across where the model, the subject, is nothing but an inanimate object there for their pleasure. Yeah. And it got really weird in some instances. I'd walk by a booth, not necessarily even in the shooting bays, wasn't there, but some brands bring in a model for lighting or for outfits or whatever. And there's a woman, Mimi, tattoo model, right?
Oh yeah, Mimi's amazing.
Amazing personality, tons of fun. Yeah. And I saw her working in one booth for a brand, and forgive me, I don't know the brand, but the amount of guys with cameras that just kind of descended and were literally shooting over shoulders and around and getting in angles, and there's no regard for who else is around. There's no regard for the model and their comfort. There's no regard for what the images are going to look like. There's no intentionality. And I can't think of a way to filter that out because it's nothing but my perception.
Yeah, of course.
But it just seems to be that there's a group of attendees that approach photography as, I'm going to create content to get me followers from a certain creepy set of followers. Am I making sense of this? I don't know how to say it. That's kind of like a complete douche nugget, but
I think you're absolutely accurate with that. And moreover, I think that's probably the better side of that very disingenuous sort of ugly coin. Like if they're creating content to try and like get followers, there's one thing. I think there were a lot of people who were just interested in having power over another person and being able to objectify a person. So if it goes to this idea of, all right, I'm getting a return on this, I still get the goosebumps and it's like, ooh, yuck. But I think there were a lot of people who weren't even interested in taking it that far. It was purely like, all right, I can be in proximity to someone who I find sexy, or, well, hold on one second. You're going straight to voicemail. That's why we should turn off our phones when we do podcasts. I've gotten sort of into contentious conversations with fellow photographers over the course of time, let's say the past half decade about this. But I do think that it's beholden to us as a community, as, a conference, let's say WPPI or TPM, as individuals, as artists, as entrepreneurs, as human beings, to safeguard those who are in vulnerable positions. And I feel like the ball is more often than not dropped in that regard, where, no one wants to ruffle any feathers. And it's kind of like, hey, keep people safe, but like, don't rub someone the wrong way. And so no precedents are set, no boundaries are set. And it becomes sort of this like no holds barred type of thing. And that's really unfortunate, because if you get that archetype into an event like this and they're like, oh yeah, I can go over and walk up to a model and be like, hey, that's really nice. Can you like give me those like bedroom eyes? And they're saying it with this voice as they're just clicking and they're not even paying attention to what we're doing. We're all very hyper aware of what that actually is, but no one's going like, hey, like, let's step back, because they don't want to create tension. But then in the process of not creating tension, we're just reinforcing these archetypes. We're emboldening these people to carry on. And if they feel like, oh, I can do this in public, while I'm on display, while there's a professional model and a professional mentor and a professional booth and professionals around me, that gives them wings to soar into whatever awful shit they do in their personal lives behind closed doors. And that's something that we as a community have to take into consideration and say, like, what are we collectively going to do to make sure that people are safe and valued and respected? And there's really not a lot of neuronal activity given to that issue, honestly, from the top down.
We want to be polite. We want to give people the benefit of the doubt. We don't want to create waves. If someone's coming to our booth, right, and we get a weird vibe from them, we're going to let them do their thing and take off, and then acknowledge that it was a little bit weird and creepy, but not do anything about it. So it's a strange thing to try to manage, being polite and then also maintaining a standard of professionalism. So it was just something that I observed. I mean, as the week goes on, I get more and more in my own head as I witness more, as I'm around more and more people, and I start to shut down and I look for ways to get out of the norm, right? I've already talked to most of my friends. I've seen them. I've connected. It's great. Now I'm just overloaded. There's so much coming at me, and I'm someone that needs quiet. I need just breathing room. And very rarely are you afforded that in the 5-7 days that you're at WPPI, because you're always running back and forth to something. And whether it's to just go back to your room to change your socks, or get a $37, I'm just going to keep increasing the price, $37 bottle of water, or, I've got to get to this seminar, or I want to go see this thing at this booth at 3 o'clock. What I find that I do is I get very selfish and I start cutting people off and texting, hey, not going to make it, not going to be there. Can't do it, need some time, because I just want to sit down. And the interesting thing is, we find, especially those of us that have a large community of friends that are scattered all over the country, that these are the moments where we have the chance to be together, right? And it's not the same thing as being on a Zoom like this, or even in a workshop. You have a finite time to see your friends and you want to spend a lot of time with them, but it's really not set up for that unless you want to eschew everything that you paid to go to Vegas for and just go hang out with your friends, right?
Very much so.
So I found myself, pulling away quite a bit, and it was the times where I could have quiet or got invited to a bar by a friend and just went and had a drink or a meal and just sat one-on-one. Those were my favorite times of WPPI because it's that real settled down connection. Everything slows down. You don't feel like you're at this breakneck pace, and you don't have 1,000 people shouting around you. I find that towards the end of the week, I started doing more and more and more of that, and avoiding the big group dinners and the parties. And while it seems to be introverted, it's more self-protection than anything else. I just
very much so
couldn't handle any more conversations. And I think what I noticed is throughout the week, there were a lot of people like that, just getting mentally worn out, not so much physically, but just mentally exhausted from doing all the things all week.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I was looking forward to all week was your workshop. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit because you and Paulina Gwaltney got together and created this workshop that was going to be a mix of your lighting teaching and her styling education. And Nanlite came through with what looked like an 18-wheeler full of lights in every way, shape, and form. And it was phenomenal. Let's talk about the workshop a little bit, because please. I got to see it behind the scenes and then also participate in it. And then we'll talk about what happened afterwards.
The unseen veil lifted shit show on the back end.
It wasn't a shit show. It was surprising turn of events.
Yeah, absolutely.
Put it at that. But we haven't had a chance to even kind of debrief since the workshop. So I want to hear what your thoughts on it were.
So for me, this is obviously I run workshops frequently here at my studio, which is where I'm at right now. And this is home, like I know this place inside and out. I know the gear that I have. I know the backdrops that I have. I know models. I know creative teams. This is my safe space because not only do I know the space, but if anything goes wrong, I have 17 contingency plans. Right. It's plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, plan F. So there's stress when I run it, but there's really not, because I know I can always fall back into another safety net or a broader safety net. So I challenged myself this year to say, hey, I'm not going to be teaching at WPPI because they didn't invite me to do that, but this is something that I really want to be able to do for myself and members of the community. Let's put on a workshop that's one day, and collaborating with Paulina, because of course, she has a skill set that's beyond me. I'm really great at styling. That's her domain of expertise. Right. So I'm we can put on something that's one day, that's at a great studio, that brings together people who are genuinely interested in learning in a more significant way than what they're able to do at WPPI. And it gives me a chance to sort of flex my muscles as an educator and a mentor, and challenge myself to be all right, I have 14 hours of studio time to build a complete setup that pseudo mirrors my space, break it down, get it back out. And so I wanted to get uncomfortable. Right. I think that's, where we grow. And so part of it was all right, I kept questioning this in the days leading up to WPPI and the weeks where I'm am I making a really big fucking mistake with this? Is this just going to be a fucking complete debacle? And it wasn't. Yeah. And a big part of that is obviously people like you, people like George who stayed and helped, Paulina, of course, Black Box Studios, where we hosted it. They were fantastic and assisted on every level they possibly could. But it was manic. I worked those show days. Firstly, what I know now is if I ever do this again at a show, it will be the day before the show and not the day after, because I was so just scraped down to the bone that I feel really good about what I did. But looking back, I know that I would have not necessarily been better, but different and more whole had I done it at the beginning versus the end. So that was one of the biggest learning things for me. And for those of you who don't know how these things work, we had a studio rental that was the day after WPPI. I got off the floor at the last day of the show floor. We immediately went Matt got parked out with boxes. We had Uber XLs and bellhops, and all of this gear was delivered. And it all had to be built out that evening when we're all just literally running on fumes, with the knowledge that that's not even the thing. That's just the preface to the thing.
Right.
But overall, I was really happy with how it turned out. You know, we were sold out at the workshop. The studio space turned out great. I feel like relative to circumstance and ability and opportunity, we really capitalized and did the best that we could possibly do. And I'm happy that a lot of people seem to have had a really wonderful experience. They felt challenged. They felt appreciated. They felt safe to be who they were in those moments. And so I didn't necessarily want to have a counterpoint to WPPI, because I feel like that's disparaging to what the show actually was.
Right.
And that's very relativistic. But I wanted something that is exactly what we've been talking about, that was more focused on genuine connection, that was more focused on intentionally creating, that was more focused on connecting with ourselves and one another and with models, that was just more focused on something that was, to me, more whole and wholehearted. And to that end, I feel like it went really well. But I mean, I have my own legal pad full of notes going, oh, I could have done this better. I could have educated better on this. I was so consumed and concerned with not only wanting to provide the best experience, but also wanting to address what I felt like were shortcomings of the conference. And that's a toxic trait I have. And that's something that I overburdened myself with, because I'm like, I know, Jonny, you're going to do this and you are this educator, and Paulina is this, but I'm like, not only do you have to be who you are, but you have to get even bigger than that to make sure that the experience resonates for the experiences that weren't had at WPPI, at TPM, and that's purely on me. But yeah, it was fucking chaotic, and it was fast, and it was a blur, and I still don't know exactly what happened, but I'm pretty sure it was fucking amazing, and I'll probably have to continue to process for weeks before that I gain some clarity on everything.
Yeah, you know, from where I sat with it, in so far as helping with the setup, which that Black Box Studio was phenomenal. What a space, what an amazing space they have. Being able to get everything set up, that actually went pretty quickly, because I think, you know, I know your setup style and generally how you light, right? So it was easy to get some of these things set up, and God knows Paulina brought an entire studio worth of backdrops.
Literally
madness. So having all that, the setup wasn't that big of a thing. It was more containing the ideas and saying, we can do anything here. We've got to set it up in such a way that when the 12 students come through, 10 or 12 students come through, that there is some order to this chaos.
Yeah.
And I think everybody that rolled in was, one, blown away by the sheer volume of creativity that they could play with. All these different bays that were set up, and pavo tubes and large lights and hard lights and projectors and just all of the toys, right? I think with it being, you had mentioned doing it before WPPI and not after, I think that I'd lend some credence to that, because by about 1 o'clock, we all started at 8:30 or 9 in the morning. And then by about 1 or 2 o'clock, you could start to see the fumes, right? And
absolutely.
Like, a couple more hours. And then as we started to get closer to the end of the day, and I realized that some of the bays weren't being used, I'm like, let me start breaking down, because I know we only have X amount of hours at the studio. I started breaking it down. And then I think the fortunate and unfortunate, I think some people saw me doing that and were like, oh God, thank God the workshop is over, because I'm exhausted. And I'm like, no, keep shooting. This is just me. Like, I got what I needed, you know. From a participant standpoint, it was amazing to be able to work directly with the models, to be able to have an idea and craft your own thing and work with a model to create that, but then also have access to you and Paulina and all of the other students that were there. And I found that is the culture that you lose at trade shows. It's impossible to recreate in a large scale, is that intimacy of creation between students, right? Starting to brainstorm together. And what if we did this? And what if we did that? And then working the model in. And what if we did that? And I think those are the things that are missing. Now, the workshop that you put on was phenomenal. I think the other thing that I saw you do in the week, which I don't know how you pulled it off. I got to tell you, is Kayla Douglas's VIP party. For those of you that don't know, Kayla Douglas and Rick Lewis, they have their wings, they have backdrops, they've got a bunch of stuff.
It's a suite of offerings.
And so they rented a house. They had a ticket-only attendance at this VIP event, and beautiful home off-site. And every room, from the bathroom to the living room to the bedrooms to the everywhere outside, everything was styled. Yeah. Stella, I think it was Light in Motion. Stella lit everything. But you and Paulina came in, like we went over early, a couple hours before the party started, and had to get everything ready. Yeah. And I don't know what was going through your mind as you were looking at these rooms and thinking styling, lighting. All I saw was Johnny zipping back and forth from room to room. I was just sitting at a table having a cocktail, and I just saw you like a Tasmanian devil. What was going through your head to get this thing all set up?
So I wanted to create a relatively stress-free, effortless way for people to come in and see beautiful styling, see beautiful environmental elements, see beautiful lighting, and then engage with that. Right. And there's so many moving parts. To those of you who haven't been involved in productions like this, when it's done really well, it's almost like magic, because you're like, wow, that looked effortless. It is never fucking effortless. It is always very effortful. There is so much that goes into it, and so many moving parts, and the logistics, and things invariably go wrong because that's life. Right. And that's just the nature of it. So I wanted people to come in and just be able to have a good time, and to relax, and to connect, and still do those modifications and things, but for it to be more of a like, hey, I'm here, I'm going to have a beer or a glass of wine or a cocktail or too many edibles, as so many people did, and just and have fun and create some semblance of diversity. But first and foremost, you know, when I was setting that up, it's how I always operate. Like, there were these models there, and they were being styled, and I'm like, I want them to feel like kings, to feel like queens, to feel like royalty. I want them to see me sweating, because that's me giving to them, and they're going to be giving the rest of the night to everyone else. So I wanted to start with that precedent that, yeah, like, I'm here and I am who I am. If you happen to know me, if I have any cachet or notoriety in your mind, and I'm being of service to you, because you're going to be of service to so many. Yeah. And I think, sort of like WPPI and TPM, people come in and they have this really, I love it almost, and I don't say naive in a negative way at all. I think it's beautiful and wonderful. It's like a child, but this sort of naivety, and they're so excited to create that intention once again falls by the wayside. Yeah. And so as people started showing up, you know, they're photographing these models because they're stunning and they're beautifully styled and it's this beautiful space, but like, you know, the light is at sternum level, and they're photographing, and I'm like, hey, everyone, I'm like, I'm not trying to be rude. I love how excited you are, but like, let's see what happens when we raise this above the eyes. Ooh, we can see cheekbones. Oh, there's life in the eyes. Oh, this is flattering. You know, we're not doing Frankenstein's monster uplighting on this individual who's there just unaware of what they look like or what they're doing, who's just operating on that professional sort of status quo wavelength. Right. So I wanted to make sure that everyone was being honored. And once again, that's just me being an empath. I take on too much, but it was the challenge too. That's one of the biggest reasons I went to WPPI and took on these things, was like, I wanted to some extent, and not in a macabre way, feel like there was a gun to my head. Right. And to say, like, this is go time, make something fucking magical, make something wonderful. The pieces of this puzzle are here for you. All of the pieces are in place. Now it's your job, puzzle master, to put them all fucking together in a cohesive way that is resonant, that's significant, that's different, that's atypical, that's unexpected. You know, and of course, crazy shit happens. We're trying to set up Stella's lights, and then we have power packs that only support 60 watts, but the lights are drawing 120 watts. So every time they go over 50%, they die. We have people kicking things over. We have rooms that aren't working. I'm trying to move these things in this beautifully decorated home, going, oh, this vase is probably worth more than my life and everything that I own, shakily moving it to the next thing. But it was just, for me, it was about everyone being able to be there and staying focused and being present on themselves, on one another, on the models, on colleagues, and just to be able to be there without the stress or the pressure or that idea that I need to create something significant, because so much of that significance was sort of built in so that they could just say, oh, this is significant, so I can simply be and be present and do what it is I want to do without those other variables coming into that equation.
I looked at that the party, and I wondered a couple of things as I sat there and took it all in. Now, I brought my camera with me, but I think I took more behind the scenes photos than I did of the model. And there were a ton of models there, and everything was just off the charts beautiful. Wow. Like, this house was just insane. But I was wondering, for workshops like that, if you're going to have a VIP party, and I can't imagine the expense of it, but would it be better, because I'm always looking for ways to improve things, is having time slots of saying your ticket gets you from 6:30 to 7:30, your ticket gets you from 7:30 to 8:30. That way it doesn't feel as chaotic, as frantic, with all these amazing photographers that are great in their own right, all kind of shuffling and trying to work past each other, none of which are the type to be shooting over shoulders, and everybody's super respectful. But at the same time, you get to a point where time is compressed and you want to get all the things. So you start to have multiple photographers in the room at the same time. And it does become like that thing where you're almost missing out on the action starts to build, and it feels rushed. It feels forced. So I'm wondering if there's that. Secondarily, is there a laminated Bill of Rights for photographers, or rules of the road that we hand out at the front door saying, here's the deal. Here's, here's how to be respectful. And I don't mean this in a condescending way, like I'm on high and no one else knows these rules, but just to reinforce it for workshops, for parties, for all these places, so that you start to create a standard of behavior that then trickles down to the trade show level and what happens at the shooting base. So
it's code of conduct type of stuff.
Code of conduct is the word I was looking for, not Bill of Rights. But the code of conduct, I just feel like that almost needs to be enforced at everything.
Agreed.
Otherwise, we're just entitling people to do that constant shooting. Everybody gets the same shot, so no one is unique. No one actually has a voice. And I don't know, it by no means was a bad time. I'm not saying that at all. I think there are just ways that we can improve this, so that the subtle undertone is that we raise everybody up to be a better creative, a better producer, a better helper, a better assistant. Everything starts to raise up a little bit.
Well, I think what we deal with at these events overtly, and I know that I've done this in my workshops directly and indirectly, consciously and subconsciously, is there's the double-edged sword, sort of like the stiletto blade, of people becoming so at ease and comfortable that everything becomes friendly, right? And so in that friendliness, we lose professional decorum. Yeah. And then you take somewhere like Vegas, where things like booze and weed or whatever else are omnipresent, and you've had a couple of Dos Equis and you've smoked a joint and everyone's ribbing you and you feel really good. And so you go over and you're just like, you've been having a great talk with the model, and maybe you even had a drink with them. And then you're like, oh, just move your leg this way. Right. And instead of saying, hey, do you mind if I touch you? It's just an assumptiveness, and there's no maliciousness in that 9 times out of 10, but there is a degree of familiarity, which I don't necessarily think is healthy.
Yeah.
And so that goes back to that code of conduct to say, hey, we're all here together, but we're going to respect each other. We're going to respect our colleagues, the models, production staff. And there's a certain level of almost like old world politeness that needs to come with this, where you're like, even if I know you, I'm still going to ask if it's okay if I shoot alongside you, because that's a basic courtesy. And if you say yes, I'm going to go great. And if you say no, I'm going to go, thank you for being honest with me, and I'm going to step back.
Yep.
But that just blurs, and then everyone's trying to get everything, and everyone's exhausted, and everyone's just a little whatever they are. So I agree with you 110%, but this has to be something that is macrocosmic. Yeah. Because if you only are faced with that type of code of conduct, or whatever we want to call it, in one specific instance, it's so isolated that it can't possibly bleed. So this has to be a sort of industry-wide effort to say, when we come together in mass, whether that's a mass of 3 or 3,000, These are the basic things that we do for ourselves and one another to make sure that everyone is being respected, to make sure that we're operating with a certain degree of professionalism, and to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and safe and at ease, because that's how we all get the most out of it. Yeah. And that's definitely an uphill battle, but it's one that we have to sort of step into, because if we don't, no one will.
Yeah. The way that I've always looked at it is that if you're not actively pressing the shutter button, meaning you're not the one that's shooting the model right there, the subject, whoever it might be, then you immediately fall into the role of assistant, and you're looking around. Hey, do you want me to change your lighting for you? Cool with this? Do you need more space? You know, what about this? I don't see enough of that. It's just people assume the identity of photographer, and they don't want to revert to being an assistant or, you know, a producer of some sort. And you know, you'd mentioned that, you know, there's a light pointed at a sternum and there's just a floating head up here somewhere. That's that code of conduct, right? Take a look before you take a picture. Take a look at what's going on. It's okay to change the lights. I think in some of these settings, people are so programmed that, all right, it's set up, therefore it must be perfect already. Johnny set it up. It must be perfect already. They don't know that you're just like, just put a fucking light in there somewhere. They'll fix it. Right. And people aren't taking that time to just slow down, look at the situation and say, either A, is this what I want? B, is this what they want? Can we help? How do we create better? There are pros and cons with it, but it has to be something that does permeate the larger community.
Absolutely.
And the only way that happens is if people are talking about it. I think in the quiet hallways and in the dark corners, we all have this conversation.
Of course.
So why not bring it to light? And how do we bring it to light?
Well, and I think another part of that too, that's sort of like to piggyback on that or run on those coattails, is so often if we look at the shooting bay sort of scenario again, you know, you get 2 minutes, and most of the time what it is there's a placard on the wall and it says, all right, you're going to be at f5.6 and ISO 200 in 1/200th of a second, and we suggest shooting this at 50 millimeter focal length, and these are the exact settings. So there is no room for experimentation. People are almost programmed into that programming to say like, all right, I operate on the wavelength I am told to operate on. And I think that itself is really damaging to the artist archetype, because then you don't learn to critically think for yourself. You simply regurgitate based on what it is you are being force-fed. Now, I understand there are massive logistical limitations when you have 2,000 people in a room and everyone's trying to shoot. You can't let everyone spend 10 minutes and do whatever they want, because it would be fucking complete chaos. But I do think that there's room to build in to say like, hey, maybe you can't move the light, but you could turn this light on or off, sort of what I was trying to do. Or maybe, you know, you can turn the model this way, or here's a piece of styling you could add to or remove. And that way people have to be more active in the process of creation and think and operate on a wavelength that is their own, rather than the common consensus of what is right or what is wrong. And like you said, I think that's what happened at the VIP party. People were like, oh, you know, the Stella crew was great. They were going around and setting things up. They weren't interested in designing lighting. They were like, holy fuck, we need to get all 20 of these lights out so the person who's designing lighting can do what it is they need to do, which is the nature of production. But I didn't have a chance to get around, or Rick or whoever else. And so someone's like, oh, there's a light here and it's on, like, we're good to go. Without going like, are we good to go though? And that's simply because everything else they were exposed to were like, when a light's on, you shoot. When there's a model there, you shoot. It's that simple and reductionist. And the problem is, I think people take that mindset back to their clients, back to their art, back to their studios, where they look at things and then suddenly they're at this stalwart place where they're frozen because they're like, well, what do I do? And that's the artist's fucking quandary, is what do you do and why? And so as conferences, as businesses, as educators and mentors, I think we need to do a better job of not just giving someone something, but explaining to them what it is we are giving them and why, and asking them to ask themselves if what is being given to them serves them and the person in front of their camera or not, and then giving them at least a little bit of freedom to pivot or change if the answer to that question is not a definitive yes, it is.